It's Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Rogue Tulips Consulting. We're here with Season 7. So glad you're joining us. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp, CAEACNP, and I'm so glad you're here for this exciting year of so many great topics, so don't forget to subscribe. This week we're joined by another first-time guest. It's Roger Devine, and he's here to talk with us about diversifying fundraising in a chaotic economy. We all need to hear this. It's Monday, June 2nd, 2025. Time for episode 287. Hey everybody, it's Monday, June 2nd. That means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp, fresh back from the Georgia Society of Association Executives Conference, where we had a great time. And also, I hope you all had a great Memorial Day holiday. As you know, Radio Free 501c took the week off for the holiday, and we're back and ready to dive into this really interesting topic with yet another first-time guest for this year. But before we get to that part of the conversation, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our global audience, wherever you may be. And thanks again for joining us. If you have not yet followed us or subscribed on your favorite podcast service, we're on all of them. So please take a moment and do that. We're having an outstanding year of really interesting guests and conversations. And this week, our guest, who is also another first-time guest, as I've mentioned, is Roger Devine, and he's here to talk with us about diversifying fundraising in a chaotic economy. And I think chaotic's a good description right now. So Roger, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here. Would you like to say hello to the audience and tell us a little about yourself?
I'd love to say hello to the audience. Hello, everyone. My name is Roger Devine, as previously mentioned, and I am one of the founding partners in a company we call schoolauction.net that provides fundraising software primarily to grassroots organizations around the country to help them plan, manage, and run fundraising events.
And so does your software work for groups other than schools?
It absolutely does. Although when we talk about fundraising events, and especially when we talk about things like galas and auctions, there's a statistic that I kind of want to throw out there that sort of explains a little bit about why we would call our company schoolauction.net. Schools, PTAs, booster clubs account for about 75% of the fundraising events that are run in a given year. That's where the bulk of all of it is. That's one of the reasons why we want to position ourselves, to be appealing to the school market. Another reason is because when we started the company, we were the consumers. I was PTA president at my kid's school. We had our annual fundraising auction coming up, and I wanted to find some cost-effective software because I was a software guy for a long time, and that's where most of my career has been. And so I tend to think in that direction. And when I went out and found that there really, at the time, back in 2006, 2007, there really wasn't much in the way of cost-effective software out there. So started a company, a few friends. And so we came from that direction. But about a third of our customer list has nothing to do with a school whatsoever. The thing that they generally all do tend to have in common is that most of the time, the organizations that we are working with are volunteer driven and they are grassroots in their impact. Their area of impact tends to be local. They tend to be raising funds, for use in a given community or with a given group of people there.
It sounds like the people who are in groups that we might refer to as social service sector
Yes.
organizations, because we're doing something impactful to help our community or a specific group of people.
Yes, and where I really wanted to go is to contrast this with the other types of markets we might have aimed for. We might have tried to sell to the American Cancer Societies and Red Crosses and the big organizations, all of which do run fundraising galas,
Right.
but they're not where fundraising galas are actually having their biggest impact. I tend to think that up at the top end of the market there, you have them put on by organizations who view them as at best a break-even enterprise, a way to, get some PR and to thank some large donors and to maybe see everybody dress up in fancy clothes once a year. But if you're running one of these things as a break even, it's not a high impact fundraiser for the organization. Um, the groups that know how to make money with fundraising events are the grassroots groups that rely on doing it, to fund their organizations year in and year out. So that's what we do. That's who we are aimed at. That's where our experience is. We do help people put on things other than auctions, golf tournaments, et cetera, et cetera. But they all tend to be event-based fundraising. So,
And I think that's a really good point about the big gala because not everybody can afford those tickets. And I think that it automatically becomes a small group of people right off the bat. So you were talking about how you wanted for our topic today, diversifying. So my question that I'm trying to lead up to is this. So if you're not a professional fundraiser, but you're
nope.
interested in fundraising, right? Like myself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a lot of different avenues to bring in fundraising, but do you think that people don't focus enough on having events, or do you think they're focusing more on mailings or just asking people to give them money one on one? So when you're talking about diversifying, what are we trying to get away from and then do more of?
I wouldn't ever take away anybody's tools. I'm
Mhm.
going to shy away from saying we need to replace something. I'm
Okay.
going to say that it's it's a common attitude to find whenever development directors get together and you talk to them about events, that events are something that they only do if they absolutely have to, if there's board pressure on them, et cetera, and that they don't find it to be a really effective use of their time compared to planned giving campaigns, larger capital campaigns, mailings, et cetera. Um, And I think that attitude probably is one that has solid roots. I'm not going to necessarily argue that it was not a sane attitude 2 or 3 years ago. However, we are in uncertain times when it comes to fundraising, and a lot of traditional sources of fundraising are under threat. Government grants are getting yoinked here and there. There's a lot more pressure on private foundations to make up the gap on those. And of course, the ever increasing wealth inequality, does tend to whittle down the number of big whales that are out there to go get checks from over time. And so any organization worth their salt knows you've got to develop young donors. You've got to get them in the pipeline. You've got to cultivate them and bring them along. And we're in a time where that's really, really, really important. And events are something that can help with that. And so I would say it may be time to reevaluate a little bit the place of events in your portfolio here for some of these structural reasons, many more of which we will get to in our conversation.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think a lot of us think an event is not a practical or value add way to bring in money, especially if, like we were talking about those big galas where we get all dressed up and you have to pay $1,500 for a ticket. And that's very off putting to people like myself, for example. I'll use a real example from my life. I'm a huge fan of the Hillwood Estate Museum in Upper Northwest Washington and Washington, D.C., not state. And they have a new exhibit coming out just this month in June about Natalie Paley. And I thought, oh, that's great. That's just the kind of thing I like to go buy tickets for and go see and support the museum. But before it's open to the public, you can't even buy tickets for the regular event, the regular exhibit, because they're having a gala first. And the only thing you can buy a ticket for right now is the gala. So I thought, well, okay, I will look at the gala tickets. Well, they were like $1,500 just for one ticket. And I thought, well, gee, I like Hillwood, but not that much. And so it's very off-putting. And you're right, it's just focused on that smaller group of people. as opposed to just buying a ticket, which most of us can afford. I don't remember exactly how they are. I think they're like $20 or something to buy a ticket to Hillwood. But what other kind of events outside of galas? Now, you mentioned something about golf. To me, golf events are also off-putting because I don't golf. So, and then the alternative I see a lot with golf events is a spa day. So it's like you're either on the golf course or in the spa. And it's like, well, there's got to be another kind of event where all the people could get together and do something. But what's your opinion about that with the golf events and things? Maybe you're a golfer. I don't know.
I am not personally a golfer. However, I do support a lot of golf events, and I think that they've got their place because they're really good for cultivating a particular category of donor.
Mhm.
When you're putting on a golf tournament fundraiser, unless if it's a grassroots organization, my Rotary Club ran a golf tournament fundraiser for years and years and years. And that was a good fundraiser for us because it was a great way to get all the club members to come because they all golf, right? But if you're at a more of a larger nonprofit here, is you've got more diversity in your donor base, or you want to diversify your donor base, and you do not have that particular category of donors that has started attaching themselves to your organization in some way. Golf tournament's a great way to get that segment of donors in. And I imagine we can all picture in our mind what this segment looks like. They probably do look a lot like me, only, maybe got broader shoulders. Who knows? Anyway, I think golf tournaments are great for that. There are a number of other different types of events that I think are out there and commonly. One of my favorites that I attended was an event down in Yamhill County, Oregon. We're on the other side of the coast, and we will talk about that again. But the down in Yamhill County, Oregon, where they had an event where there were 25 chefs from the area, the greater area, prepared a signature little dish, and they had a big tasting, and you bought tickets to go to the tasting, and you tasted all of the different little samples of food. And oh yeah, there was a silent auction there, and oh yeah, we were going to do a paddle raise over here, but everybody's here and we're having fun and we're eating, so we're all happy, right? And that tended to work out beautifully for that particular organization. But again, that was tailored to their community. I think that events play this particular role better than a lot of other types of fundraising outreach, in that they can bring in segments of donors. They can be tailored to the mission of a smaller grassroots organization, and they're community builders. This is where you're getting your donor community together and getting them an opportunity to reinforce to each other why they love a given organization and a given mission.
Well, and I think tailoring it to a community is pretty obvious, but I don't think everybody thinks of it that way. Things that are obvious to me don't seem to be obvious to other people. But I love those kind of fundraisers where you get to taste food or wine. At the GSAE conference, we had a beer tasting that we could go to and try different kinds of beers. And that was also a fundraiser for GSAE. So being able to do those kind of things, I think, is great. And another group that I belong to, ASAE, which is the national group for association executives, does something they call the Classic at every conference, which is a fundraiser for the ASAE Foundation. And you buy a ticket, and it's basically what you just described. You get to see your colleagues, you get to try food, maybe dance a little bit. Sometimes they have music. So it's really fun, and it seems to me that the successful ones are social.
They are. They are absolutely social events.
Mhm.
And a lot of their value lies in them being social events, in addition to everything you just said there. And I don't want to repeat those advantages.
Yeah.
But but think about one that's really relevant to the moment right now. Inside most nonprofit organizations, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear about funding, et cetera, who's going to have a job, et cetera. Which organizations are going to survive? A lot of nonprofit organizations really have only got about 3 months worth of operating capital in the bank. So there's that,
Well, if they have that much.
if they have that much.
Yeah.
And so an event can help not only have your donors reinforce with each other that this is important,
Mhm.
it can reinforce to your staff that there is a group of people out there that support what you are doing, that love what you are doing, that want you to keep doing it. And they can give the staff of the organization, they can give the organization itself a little bit of wind under its wings, just in addition to the money, just as validation that what they're doing out there has an audience. It has a group of people that are willing to fund it. We bring that in, we demonstrate that this is out there.
Well, and I think in groups, especially those that are what we might call the social service sectors, the people who help the homeless or
Yes,
people who are hungry or things like that, or maybe they are the PTA supporting the
sure.
school. What they want to have are many options for people to support. So my $15, if it's coupled with another 100 people giving $15, is then suddenly $1,500. And then more people have bought in and support it, like you said. And I think finding those different levels. I personally, and this is me, I'm going to go back to the golf thing for a second. Golf is kind of an expensive sport. And so and also you really have to practice it a lot to be good at it. So I think doing golf tournaments, unless you're like a golf association, is probably not the best way to get people together to do something. And not everybody's an athlete. Not everybody enjoys sports. And so I know you want to have the mix, like maybe we have the golf tournament this week and next week we have a bake off or something. But I just want to say that there's certain things like golf tournaments or going to the spa that are kind of expensive. And being able to make that donation to be able to participate in that's not always a good idea either. So other than our classic one that we all love, the annual bake sale, what are some of the other kind of smaller events that you've seen and help people support with your work?
Schools love pledge events. And that's our internal term for what you might call a thon,
Mhm.
a readathon or a jogathon or a whatever a thon. Um, that basically follow a formula of go out and get pledges from people to support some unit of activity, conduct the activity over and over again, go collect the pledges. Those are definitely a staple of schools, and they tend to be, great ancillary fundraisers, a good part of the mix for a given school. I tend to think that there's a lot of schools that try to shy away from them simply because the classic model of doing so involves students doing work to raise money, and many organizations shy away from that. Many schools will shy away from that and say, "No, I don't want to put my kids to work." Um, one of the other types of events that we love to see out there, because I think it's crazy amounts of fun, um, is incorporate a dance contest or a talent contest. One of the things that we can support in our software is the idea of like you putting on your own Dancing with the Stars. You get 10 or 12 couples together, and then the fundraising aspect of it is that people in the audience can log in on their phones and buy votes for the candidates that they want to win the whole thing. Really, really fun there. But again, all of these things are going to prime all of these things outside of the sort of middle range gala. So this is going to include your art gallery, high end gala. It's going to include golf tournaments. It's going to include talent contests, things like this. The more specialized or the more exclusive ones, let's put it that way. Because an exclusive one could be a high ticket price, or it could be an activity that you don't enjoy, that's the
Mhm.
center of this. Those are going to be most useful in cultivating certain donor segments. And you might only value those in your organization if the segments that they're good at reaching are a deficiency in your donor database at the moment. Because remember, if you do an event that requires registration, if you're going to require people to either buy a ticket or register online for it, you get to add those people to your database. And maybe you're bringing in a whole bunch of, Bob already, and Bob likes to golf every weekend, and you're getting Bob to bring three of his golf buddies with him. Those might be people that you get to add to your database, and they have been introduced to your mission, and they could potentially be cultivated through additional means there.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because we're building out our contact list every time we're doing some sort of a fundraiser, no matter what it is. Now, you mentioned a few rather serious issues affecting fundraising, one of which is federal grants being canceled or pulled from people. And I know an issue with grants has always been you don't know how long you're going to keep that grant because a lot of grants have a time limit of maybe 3 years and then possibility of renewal. Some of them, it is an annual, year to year. I've talked with other people at nonprofits of all kinds who do get grants, and it's been very startling because of the suddenness of the grants being removed. There
Yep.
was no buildup. There was no cushion of time. It's just they're just gone. So what are people doing? You already mentioned people are relying on the private foundations to fill that need for people. But what are people doing outside of that to try to compensate for those grants? Are they just really looking more at private grant funding, or are they doing more diversified fundraising?
We're seeing people do more diversified fundraising. The
Mhm.
ones that are coming to us are people, or that were the customers we're picking up this year are customers who have not done an event in maybe 5 or 6 years. They got away from it, and they're bringing this back into the mix. I also follow a lot of the conversation online, and I'll tell you, there's a whole lot of organizations that are simply putting faith in doubling down on the things that they know how to do.
Mhm.
Send out more mailings, send out, more appeals, and, make more phone calls, so meet with more people whose wallets are fat and lives are short, you know? Um,
That's right. We want those legacy gifts.
we want those legacy gifts, and so it certainly seems that there's a lot of doubling down. But we're seeing a pretty big uptick in number in organizations that are saying, okay, I haven't done this in 3 years or 5 years. It used to be something we did. We need to bring it back in.
Mm.
And, okay, I agree. It's that time.
Well, I want to ask your opinion on this. So you talked about maybe doing more mailings, and sure,
Sure.
how are people going to know about you? But one of the things I really do not like is when I get one of these mailings, ask me to support a cause, and the envelope is full of crap. And I'm just going to say crap because it's like pens, notepads, maybe a calendar, or some other little doohickey thing to clutter up your desk. And I look at that and I think, why aren't they just using this money to support the cause? I would much rather get a postcard or just a nice letter with a return envelope or a card in there with the website to go donate to. So I don't know if you have an opinion on that topic, but I'm asking, do you have an opinion on that? Putting all that stuff in those envelopes?
Yeah. I have multiple opinions. I'm large. I contain multitudes. Um, as a marketing guy, and I've been a marketing professor at the local university here.
Mhm.
Um, what works works, and
Mhm.
what's battle tested and works.
Mhm.
However, so I would never say to a development director or somebody conducting a mailing campaign that you must not do this. However, I think it's lazy to assume that your entire donor database is going to have the same reaction to what's in your mailing. And I
Yes.
think that there's going to be a large segment of people out there that feel exactly the way that you do. Like, don't butter me up. Don't give me a tchotchke. I don't need something else for my shelf. I don't need something else to wonder how I'm going to recycle it. You know,
Right.
just ask me for the donation. I'll give what I can, and you use that effectively. And so I think any given mailing campaign, any given, program where you're going to be sending out mailings, should allow for you to collect that information and segment your donor database so that these people get over here who love the stuff and they love the extra touch. Okay, we'll spend money there because it works. It's fine. But I'm going to let everybody I can self-identify to say, no, don't bother me with that stuff. Maybe I'm going to make them ask 2 or 3 times because maybe the first time I just caught them on a bad day, and they're just saying no to everything. I might make them ask 2 or 3 times, but I'm going to start listening for those signals. I want to send targeted marketing out there, targeted mailings, targeted email campaigns. I want to have donation pages on my website that are designed for different donor segments. We would call those campaigns. You should run different online donation campaigns to target your donor database. It's going to be more effective out there. And if you are going to double down and try to squeeze more juice out of the lemon, I think that targeting is a segmentation, targeting, and positioning is what we used to teach it as, is a really key skill to bring into your mailing programs.
Yeah. And my reaction, I'm sure I'm not the only one. So I get this big envelope with all the stuff in it. Like there's one I get every year around the holidays, and it's got like a mini dream catcher and paper, a pad of paper and a pen and who knows what else. Just all kinds of stuff. And it makes me mad because, like I said, why aren't you spending this money helping the cause instead of buying all this stuff and because that makes that one piece of mailing very expensive because you're putting all that stuff in it and the postage and everything, and you got to have the bigger envelopes that all fits in there. So I take all that stuff out and try to figure out what can I do with it? How can I repurpose it? And then I don't give them any money because the other reaction I have is if they can spend $4 to $5 per mailing, they obviously don't need any donations because they're spending so much money on this, and it doesn't motivate me. And you're right, we need to segment. We talk a lot in associations about segmenting our membership to make sure that the members are getting what they need, but that's equally important for donors and outside of our members who are donors, because what I like is getting a choice. Like, do you want one of these items? If not, you can say, no, thank you. Don't send it. And I like that. So I support the Arbor Day Foundation and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology are two of the groups that I support. And they both ask, do you want something or not? And so I can say, no, that's okay. Just plant those trees somewhere else. I don't need them.
Exactly.
Or yeah, yes, I would love another bird themed coffee mug. Thank you very much. So
Exactly.
you,
Some of us depend on these things for our calendars every year.
yeah. That's true. Well,
Kind
and that is a good point. And in our neighborhood, there's a neighbor who every year around the holidays sends out a note on our community list. If you have a bunch of calendars, I'll pick them up on this day, and then she donates them to another group that needs them. And I don't need that many calendars. I think
no,
I end
no,
up getting
no.
8 or 10 every year, and I give
Yeah,
most of them away. But
yeah. I think that, there's another hidden problem here if you're not segmenting and targeting,
mhm.
which is that the swag that you're putting into the packets that you're sending out, you need to be very careful about the cost of each of those items. So it's probably less good swag than you would put into a mailing that had a smaller um, mailing list to send it to, which would be the people who've opted into, yes, send me another bird themed coffee mug.
Yeah.
I might actually put a coffee mug in. That's kind of an expensive thing rather than rather than a calendar, which might be something I could rip off down at the Kinko's, get them to print
Yeah.
one for me. Who knows?
That's
But
right. And yeah. And I just think the segmentation is important because if somebody's donating money to support a cause, it's because they like the cause, not because they want your stuff. And I think
100%. And
yeah.
this is the biggest lesson I would say that PTAs and booster clubs have to teach to other types of nonprofits, which is that, self-interest and solving the problems that matter to me, makes me a very powerful donor. It really does. And down at the grassroots level, they've known that for years and years and years, that you don't necessarily have to get the biggest whale out there to come to your event, as long as you can get medium-sized fish who care a whole lot about you and your cause and what you're doing with this money. A whole bunch of medium-sized fish can make up for a whale. It
That's
really can.
right. That's right. And I know, and you and I are using these terms about fish because we know what they mean. For those in the audience who may not know that, a whale is a donor who might be called a mega donor. They have a
Writes big
lot of
checks.
money. Yes, they write big checks. And so that's why we're using the fish analogy. So I just realized not everybody would know that. But yeah, those are the people who can write you a $10,000 check
Right.
without thinking about it. And then there's other people who maybe can give you $10 and they have to think about it.
And there's probably 10 people in your close knit community of people who are absolutely committed to your cause who can give you $1,000.
Mhm.
And if you can get 10 people giving you $1,000, then you've replaced your $10,000 whale that you're out there with. And the magic in a traditional fundraising gala, as done by grassroots organizations, always comes with a special appeal, because at the grassroots level, there's a twist on the special appeal, which is that you really, really want to aim for 100% participation in it. You really want everybody who is in that room to give at least something, to at least get on the record as being a donor to your organization there. And there's tips and tricks on how to do that without wasting too much time, etc. But again, broad-based fundraising here, I'm going to, that, amongst a community of people who is devoted to your cause, is going to be a stable base for what you're
Mhm.
doing. It's going to be a stable base. Is it going to solve all your problems? Probably not. You probably have to have a diversified fundraising mix with many different types of campaigns that you're throwing out there in the world, and events would only be a part of that. But it is a stable base in chaotic times because you're not appealing to an impartial entity like a foundation or a government or what have you. You don't necessarily have to approach them as, oh, I know you've got many causes that you want to donate to. Here's how mine shoehorns into your desired thing here. You're really going for the most committed people who really want to see your organization survive. And so in a time like this, I think that's an easier ask. And goodness knows it can provide some of your budget. It can provide a chunk of your budget that you should not ignore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an excellent point because I think broad-based is always better. If you could have a broad base of whales, that would be outstanding. So broad-based is always better. But I also think, in all seriousness, the more inclusive you are and the more people you bring in, even if they're only giving you $10 each, you're bringing in somebody and saying you appreciate their support. And one of the things I like to do personally as a donor is if I'm donating online with my credit card, which, frankly, is how I pretty much donate to everybody. If
Sure.
they ask me to pay the credit card processing fee, I go ahead and pay that too, because then the whole amount of my donation goes to the organization and they have the money to pay the processing fee. And I use American Express most of the time, so that tends to be higher for some reason to process that one. So that's really an appreciative thing. And I think if people just get a thank you card or email, and another group that I support, Best Friends Animal Sanctuary.
Oh, I love
And
best friends.
oh, aren't they great? I love them. I
Yes.
give them a little bit. I can't give a lot, but I give a little bit every year. And
Mhm.
they sometimes will call you to thank you. And they have many times left me a voicemail thanking me for the donation. And if I would have picked up the phone, if I recognized the number, they probably would have just thanked me and had a short conversation, which I'm always like, that's really great. So things like that. And another thing, we were talking about all the tchotchkes a few minutes ago. They never send you tchotchkes. They just send you a letter or a newsletter. I like getting their magazine. They don't send you all that stuff. They just say, please help us reach our goal of no kill shelters all across the board. And I love that because there's also, and this is maybe something you've seen as well, Roger, they have that one overarching goal for everything else they do, which is 100% no kill shelters in the United
Fits in a
States.
phrase. It's about this long.
Yeah.
100% no kill shelters.
Yeah.
Very concise, very easy to
And
understand.
it's very easy to do. So do you see that a lot with the people you work with, or maybe in your own volunteer fundraising work, that there's that just that one major goal and everything else supports that in some way?
It's one of the reasons that we really enjoy working with smaller organizations, because oftentimes they are more focused. Oftentimes, a community-based nonprofit might be in, well, it might be a humane shelter, it
Mhm.
might be a food bank, etc. But they tend to have pretty focused goals on what they are there to do, focused missions. And of course, in fundraising, you've got to sell the mission first before you can ask for the donations. And I think it's really, really effective if your mission is easy to understand and concise. And like, I love that 100% no kill shelters.
Yeah.
What is that? That's like 5 words,
Mhm.
6 words, and depending on how you count the numbers. But is it a number or are they words? What are we talking about here?
And
But
it's
the
no kill one word because it's hyphenated.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how to count this. Anyway, the I forget the point I was trying to make, so cut this part
Oh,
out.
oh, we
No,
were.
no.
No, I think we could leave this part in. What we were talking about was the messaging and
Right,
how
right, right.
we're supporting that. Because the other thing I love about best friends is their storytelling. They are so good at the storytelling. So they'll tell you a story about a bird that lives in Bird Town, or a cat that lives in the cat village, or a horse that lives there. I don't know what they call the horse village. I'm sure it's got a name. They'll have their
A
names.
paddock, right?
So the paddock, the horse
Yeah.
paddock, and or the stable. But they tell you these great stories, and they'll tell you about, like, oh, somebody found this poor injured animal on the side of the road and brought them to us, and we were able to nurse them back to health. And then the great part of the story for me is that these animals can live there forever if no one ever adopts them. They just get to stay there and live among the other animals and the people who take care of them. And so they're very great storytellers. Here's the story of how we got started. Here's the story of all the animals we help. And one of my favorite stories was how they took in the fighting dogs from who was that? Michael Vicks, I think his name was,
Hmm.
the football player,
Vic.
and
Yeah.
he was in dog fighting, and
Hmm.
they took all his dogs and
Hmm.
they all lived there.
Hmm.
The ones that could not be rehomed, they just get to live there because they're able to manage them. So this is my favorite story because out of a horrible situation, these dogs were then given a home and treated like dogs and not gladiators.
And I just want to point out one thing here. That was such effective storytelling.
Mhm.
Part of the reason we know is because you're telling me the story right now. And you're
Mhm.
saying it on a podcast and you weren't asked to necessarily, you weren't paid to do that or anything like it. It's like,
Nope.
it's such good storytelling because it obviously resonated and took up space in your brain. And you are now repeating the story and extending its reach out there. And I want to go to the Best Friends website and make a donation myself.
Give them money now.
Give them money now. No, no. So the role of storytelling, of course, is immense. And you can tell stories in many different ways. There's lots of effective ways to do it. I think a lot of people are focusing right now on online video as a way to deliver storytelling efficiently across a large group of people. But, give me your reaction here. Would you rather hear a story from a member of the organization who is talking to you in real time and you are present in the same room and they're making this presentation to you and taking questions, or would you rather watch a video? Videos are more convenient. I can watch it at midnight if I want to.
That's right.
But a lot of times I feel more moved when somebody is asking me in person, even if it's one to many, even if they're on stage and I'm in the audience, it's a more inclusive feeling,
Hmm.
and
That's
thus I'm
exactly
feeling
it.
more connected.
And you feel the emotion,
Yeah,
and you really see the commitment. Videos are great if you want to learn something or somebody wants to give you a quick message. But what happens with videos, unless it's my podcast, is they get overproduced and edited, and people are reading a script. And that's okay because they're hitting all the talking points. But what
sure.
I want to hear is why you, Roger, are so committed to supporting your local PTA.
Absolutely.
I don't want to hear you read the talking points, say, "Hi, I'm Roger Devine, and I'm here to
Yeah,
talk to you about the PTA." And it's like, okay, you already lost me.
right,
It's like, give me that in-person thing. And I used to be very active at ASAE as a volunteer years ago. And one of the things I did was ask people to give money to their PAC. Now, of course, it being ASAE's PAC, we could only ask members, other members of the
right,
organization, talk to them about it, and then make the ask. But the personal ask almost always worked, because we would say it doesn't have to be $2,000; it can be $25. And then they had a recognition for the committees and councils where if 75% of the council members gave money, you got a special designation as an APAC champion. So that's sort of a thing, that ongoing recognition of many people instead of just a few people, I think has a great impact on getting more people to support you, whatever it is you're asking them to support. So whether you're asking them to donate to help feed people, or you're asking them for a donation to any PAC of any kind, political action committee, for those of you out there who are wondering, what does PAC mean? Because acronyms can be confusing. But just any ask, you really want to recognize people. And I think that's something we could all get better at, is giving recognition to others.
couldn't have said it better myself there, Cecilia. Can't agree with
Okay.
you any more than that. I would only, as a marketing guy here, I got to loop it all back into my main topic, right? One of the ways
Right.
you can recognize people is get them together and applaud them.
Mhm.
Get them together and lead a round of applause for your donors, etc. Easier to do that when you are gathered together.
Yes, that is so true. And bringing people together is really why we get involved in any organization. Is we want to be together, we want to support each other, we want to support a common goal or a common mission. And I think that is really your point about why we should be doing more events that are not these big galas
No, they're
necessarily.
cost
We should
efficient
do
events.
less. Yeah.
And I don't know, as a sort of a tangential benefit there or a tangential reason to do this,
Mhm.
we've all seen the research about the loneliness epidemic
Yeah.
in this country right now. It might be really, really, really appealing now in a way that it might have been less appealing years ago to get together. We did see a huge rush of in-person events happen after the lockdowns were lifted, after the pandemic. There was just a hunger for people to get together in person and rub elbows again.
Yeah.
And although I think that, we certainly don't have the restrictions we had during the pandemic, we have some bad habits that we haven't fully shaken yet that were
Yeah.
developed during that time.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think I sometimes laugh because I think I went out more during the lockdown than after the lockdown, because we weren't supposed to go out. But when the
You rebel,
lockdown,
you.
I am my husband too. We were out going out to restaurants and eating in tents because you couldn't go inside. You had to eat in a tent outside. And yeah, we did all that. We thought it was kind of adventurous. But you're right. We created these habits of self-isolation.
Hmm.
And we also know that being isolated is not good for us.
Right?
And that's why I love technology, because things like this Zoom, you're on one end of the country, I'm on the other, and yet we can still have a real-time conversation with each other. It's not quite the same energy as being in the same room, but you could still connect. And I think that really helped a lot of people get through the lockdown. Although since we're talking about that for a minute, I always think of that as my Emily Dickinson period because Emily Dickinson's one of my favorite poets, and she became a recluse later in her life and just never went out. And no one knew she was a poet until she died, and they found all her
Right.
work in a trunk somewhere. So I just kind of look at it that way. But I think getting people out, getting them together, doing anything fun is important. And before we wrap up the episode, you
Sure.
had mentioned what I think is historically a societal issue, which is wealth inequality. And I say historically because we've always had wealth inequality in human society. And I think now we're just so much more aware of it. And I think also there has been that gap has grown again. It's very similar to the British Empire, where I believe it was 400 families owned 80% of the wealth of the empire, not England, the
The
empire.
empire.
That's
Yeah.
not a lot of people
Yeah.
when you're looking at an empire. And
Yeah.
so we do have these periods where that gap just is crazy big. And yet, no matter how big that wealth inequality is, we still see people being generous.
We
So,
do.
have you seen some examples of that, or have you seen some maybe different twist on those uh, events, those ways of getting people together to support each other with whatever they can donate?
There's continual twists and tricks that we get taught
Mhm.
out there. We get to help facilitate a large number of events. That doesn't mean that we design the events. The organizations design the events, and then they teach us about the kind of thing they want to do, and we help them
Mhm.
do it. And the innovation is constant, and it is way out there. Uh, Probably the thing that I would push more than anything else during this time as an adaptation is the idea that you should be taking recurring donations. You should be
Mhm.
setting up a way for you to have a support circle, a giving circle, or whatever you want to call it, where you are hitting people every month for a small dollar donation. And again, is this going to be appealing to the largest donors out there? Maybe, maybe not, but is it going to be something that you can sell to everybody who is deeply connected to your mission and your organization? Yeah, you probably can. You can probably say, like, I need $1 a month, or I need $2 a month, or if you can, $25 a month, or what have you. I think that this has become much, much easier to implement in the last 5 or 6 years. Um, one of the necessary things I have to deal with in my career here is we are adjacent to the payment processing industry. And there's a tremendous amount of innovation going on in the payment processing industry. You definitely want to have all of your donation programs accepting payments in as many different methods as possible. Of course, we know of the traditionals, the checks and cash and pledges, but you also have um, many other ways that people are going to want to pay for their donations at the end of an event, donor advised funds, matching gifts, etc. So have all of that in play when you are designing your event. Have all of that available to you, and understand that you need to segment your supporter base, and you need to target them with different elements of your fundraising event. One of the things we haven't even touched on here is that one of the things I love about events is that within them, inside the event, they can be very diverse. You can have many, many different ways within the event that you're asking people to support the organization. Anywhere from, auctions to special appeals to raffles to pick boards to all sorts of different things there. Um, so, segment, target, position, be prepared to handle payments in any form that they're going to come in. If you don't have Google Pay and Apple Pay implemented, you really should. If you don't have, the ability to take crypto, maybe you should, depending on how you feel about that.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'm just kind of, I'm still kind of, my jury is out on crypto, and it's still kind of out on artificial intelligence too. So, and the only reason I'm kind of not sure about crypto is it's wildly unstable in its value from
I would
minute to
think that
minute.
any organization that's going to take a donation in crypto is going to want to convert that immediately.
Yeah.
I don't think that nonprofit organizations really should be in the game of playing the crypto market
Hmm.
and trying to, ride the ups and downs. There are trained financial professionals who are really bad at that.
Yeah.
So why would we think that somebody who's not trained would be,
You're right.
able to
Right.
like wedge that in as one of their supplementary details that they have to take care of kind of on the side? But the idea of accepting donations in crypto simply means you've got a wallet that you can accept donations into, and you have a service that you can then use to convert that into cash. And I think it's uh, an investment that may not work for the most small or for the smallest or the grassroots organizations out there. It may not be worth it to implement that at this point in time. Certainly, there's a learning curve on it. But for anybody who's a little bit bigger than that, regional level nonprofits, I think it's time for you to start thinking about um, how you're going to respond to a donor who wants to make a large donation using cryptocurrency.
Well, and hopefully people will have those big donors wanting to make the big crypto donation, and you can figure out how to solve it.
Yeah,
That would
yeah,
be wonderful. Well, Roger, this has been such a fun conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
I
And
have as well.
thank you. And thank you for joining me. And I always like to ask my guests, what's the one thought you would like the audience to take away today from this conversation? And then how can they get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more?
The one thought I want to really leave everybody with was the one we discussed earlier about how events are for your dedicated supporters and can provide a stable base every year. They're not necessarily the thing you're going to use to land the biggest donors, but they are going to land you some of your most stable year over year donors.
Oh,
And
and
then
then
if
how,
anybody would like to get in touch with me, email me. My email address is Roger. You spell it Roger. You don't have to put a D in there. People like to put a D in there, but you don't have to. If you do, I'll still get it though. It's Roger at schoolauction.net. Auction is singular and it's a .net, not a .com. So sometimes this is a hard email address to write down.
excellent. Well, thank you so much, Roger. You shared so much great advice today. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad you found it helpful there, and I would be happy to come back and talk again at any time because it's been so much fun.
It has been fun. Yes, you're definitely on the callback list. I
Thank you
love
very
it.
much.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next time with another exciting episode. And I do hope that you have taken a moment to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast service so you don't miss all these great conversations we're having this year. If you would like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com, and then let's have a conversation. If you would like to find this podcast episode with Roger, you can check out our podcast page, and you can also find all of our other great episodes that we've had over the last few years. If you'd like to see what the heck is on my mind this week, check out our blog on the blog page. Very easy to find. And last but not least, our education page. Even though it's summer, we're still offering our ethics course. If you're looking for ethics education or that CE requirement for renewal, check out our education page and sign up. Also, don't forget to sign up for our Notify Me form for when our fall session opens. So thanks again for joining us. And on behalf of Roger and myself, we'll see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together. Thanks.